All right, so now that we have the definitions of the related conditionals, let's do a few examples. It says, given the original conditional statement, write the related conditional noted and show the symbol at the right of the page. The original conditional they've given to us in exercise A says, if it is sunny outside, then it isn't going to rain. And I'm going to start this as I have with the other problems we've looked at, or the other exercises. I'm going to take the hypothesis and I'm going to highlight it, but I'm going to use yellow because I want to be consistent with you guys. Here we go. And then I'm going to highlight the conclusion in a different color. In this case, I chose green. And then I'm going to go to that step of putting a P above the hypothesis and a Q above the conclusion. I also want to show the symbolic form of the original conditional, which will always be P, arrow, Q, or P implies Q, or if P then Q. That is the symbolic form of any original conditional. It might even show up if we're looking at multiple flavors of the conditional with all these different related conditionals just as conditional, and that doesn't necessarily have to say original. The first related conditional they're looking for is the converse. And I know from my notes that what I need to do is reverse the order of the P and the Q to come up with the new sentence. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to show the symbolic form first. Okay, so what was P to Q for the original conditional now becomes Q to P. And I'm going to go ahead and type this in because I want to make sure that everybody can see what I'm writing. You guys need to write this in. Okay, we're going to start again with Q. Okay, Q is over here, right? We identified it in the original conditional as it isn't going to rain. So for the converse, I just need to say if it isn't going to rain. That'll be the beginning of the sentence. What was after then goes behind if in the converse. Okay, now I'm going with the other piece of this, right? I need to take what was the P and I need to dump him into the back of the sentence. And so I end up with, then it is sunny outside. Okay. So if you need to pause the video to write that out, please do so, and then come back to us. You also might take the opportunity to highlight what it is you did. Okay, there is the P, there is the Q, and I'm going to just keep my head straight. And I might even throw a little line in the middle there to make sure I know what direction I took. All right, now let's talk about the inverse. The inverse, per our notes, means that we're going to, whatever the original conditional was, we're going to do the opposite. And we show that notation with that tilde. Okay, and I'm going to take the original conditional. I'm going to leave P in the front. But again, I need to do the opposite of whatever it is we started with. So my symbol here is going to be tilde P, arrow, tilde Q, or not P implies not Q. Okay. The gig is we are trying to just do the opposite of whatever it was originally. So again, I'm going to go with text here, and let's try to figure out what direction to take. Let me make sure we got this right here. Okay. All right, so if I'm going to do the opposite of P, okay, and P was originally it is sunny outside, the opposite of it is sunny outside will be it is not sunny outside. Okay, by putting the not there, it changes what was originally the P to not P. For my Q, to make him not Q, I need to do the opposite of whatever the original was. The original said it isn't going to rain, so my inverse is going to sound like this. Then it is going to rain. And that would be the inverse of that original conditional. Again, I might even go to the level of saying, all right, I've got the P. Whoops. Let me change that to yellow. I'm trying to be consistent. The P was over here. The main idea was something about it being sunny. The Q was something about it being raining. But in the case of the inverse, we know that we're going to end up with a not P implies not Q by changing the direction or changing the, doing the opposite. Finally, our contrapositive, the biggest term of the related conditionals, and that means we're going to do everything to it. Okay, so what was originally P to Q, we know we're going to reverse it, and we also have to change whatever the original conditional was to the opposite, meaning if it was not, we go regular, if it was regular, we go not. So let's see how this looks. Okay, I've got not Q. So here's my original Q. I need to make this the opposite and dump him in the front of the sentence. So we do if it is going to rain, gives us our contrapositive. Then I go to my P. Original P was if it is sunny outside. So the not P will be it is not sunny outside. Then it is not sunny outside. Remember, the contrapositive is the largest word. We're going to do everything to him, not him, and change the order. So again, the general thought process for P had to do with, and I just keep doing that, y'all, I'm sorry, had to do with the fact that it's sunny outside. So there's generally where the P was, there's generally where the Q is. If we're showing it in the symbol form, I'm going to put it underneath. It's a not Q implies not P. Okay, so if you didn't get all of that written at this point, will you please pause the video and make sure that your page looks just like what we have written or whatever I've written here, and so that way you'll have something good to go back on. If you're ready to move forward, let's move on to the bottom. Here we've got a U try, and here I'm going to go ahead and open up all three of these. I know you guys have them on your sheet. Okay, we've got a original conditional. If a shape is not a square, then it is a triangle. Okay, we do have an original P and original Q. I want you to do the same thing you did above, but make sure you realize what they're asking for. The first one is asking for inverse. The second one's asking for converse, and the third one's asking for contrapositive. So they flipped these two. You know, we learn these symbols and we learned them in this order. You'll hear it in this order quite often. Original conditional, P implies Q. Original, or with the original conditional, the converse of that will be Q implies P. The inverse is going to be not P, then not Q. And the contrapositive, not Q, then not P. Okay? But keep in mind, it's not always going to be in that order when you're asked for them. All right, go ahead and pause the video, check your work afterwards, and make sure that you got the same thing that I got. Okay, so this is what your page should look like. If you didn't go to the effort of doing the P's and the Q's and the highlights, as long as you got the right words, I'm good with it, but I will tell you, you can get lost in translation quickly on these based on using with all these knots and so forth. One of the things I wanted to point out on this example B, if you read the conditional, original conditional, it says, if a shape is not a square, then it is a triangle. Well, I hope we can all agree that just because a shape isn't a square, it may not be a triangle, right? There is definitely going to be a counterexample I can come up with. And that's the conditional, and we can say that that's false because of that. And then I look at the contrapositive. Remember, this goes along with the logical relationships that we talked about at the very end of the lesson on the front of the page. It says if a shape is not a triangle, then it is a square. Again, there's a lot of scenarios where I'm going to say just because it's not a triangle, it's not necessarily a square. There are other shapes it could be. So this is a prime example of where the conditional is false and the contrapositive then would also be false. All right, we've got one more U try for you guys to work through. And the one thing you need to do differently here is that before you get into the transposition of the original conditional to the related conditional, contrapositive, inverse, or converse, first you need to take what they give you and create the if-then statement. And you've done a little bit of that. We did some of it on the board and on the homework. So go ahead and pause the video, work through these 4 different sentences, make sure you have the symbolic form that goes along with it over here on the right hand side, and then check your work. Okay, so these are the sentences that should look like on your sheet. The one catch here, and keep in mind I kind of made that comment, there's an all, there's an R. It's kind of like the all and then the verb is the guy that separates the other piece. So when I did the if then, it became if I'm a student, then I don't like waking up early, and then I proceeded from there. If you have any issues, raise your hand and we'll be glad to help you.